Hello and welcome once again to my Shnockered Wrestling Reviews. I'm your host, George the Drunken Animal. Tonight I will be reviewing the Money in the Bank 2016 pay-per-view that just happened on the WWE Network yesterday. To assist me in my endeavors tonight, I will be consuming Bushmills Irish Whiskey. This ought to be fun, folks. So, first off, my overall impression of the show, great show overall. Even the stuff that wasn't that great was still good. There was no real bad matches on the show. Everything seemed to be decent to great at best. It was definitely a three-match show. The Money in the Bank match, the John Cena AJ Styles match, and the World Heavyweight title match with Rollins and Reigns were definitely the three matches that carried this show to overall greatness. But we'll start off, the pay-per-view started with the tag match, which was the Fatal 4-Way tag match for the tag team titles, featuring the New Day defending their titles against Kaz and Enzo, the Vaudevillains, and the Club. You can tell I'm already feeling the buzz here. Fun little opener. Not a lot to note, but there were a couple of really strange spots that occurred during the match that kind of threw things off. New Day does end up retaining their titles after a bunch of shenanigans going on between everybody. But the two things that really caught my eye that seemed really off was one, at one point you had Simon Gotch and Enzo Amore in the ring. Amore had went for a sunset flip type pin on him, and it looked like that Kofi Kingston was supposed to come in and hit the Trouble in Paradise kick to break it up. But to me it looked like that Simon Gotch forgot what was going on, and he kicked Enzo off, causing the Trouble in Paradise kick to miss and just really flubbed everything up there for a second. But they recovered well. At the end of the match, you had the Club had just laid out Simon Gotch with the Magic Killer, and all of a sudden you have Big E run in, grab Carl Anderson for the big ending, but Doc Gallows was just standing there, or Luke Gallows was just kind of standing there doing nothing. Again, I think it was supposed to be that Big Kaz was supposed to run in and stop him from breaking up the move, but Kaz was a little off timing, so Gallows just ended up standing there instead of trying to do something, and it just ended up not looking really, really good at all. But eventually the New Day do retain after pinning Simon Gotch. A good fun match. Like I said, there are a couple of little iffy spots, but it was overall a good match. Then you had the Baron Corbin versus Dolph Ziggler match number 5,372 in their series. Hopefully this is the last match. It was not a bad match per se. Ziggler always has a way of making whoever he's in the ring with look good, but it's a Baron Corbin we're talking about. I've never been that huge of a fan of his, even in NXT. we'll see where they go from here. Corbin does finally end up getting a win with his end of days move after a bunch of reversals all over the place. Yeah, it was what it was, but there was one point where it looked like Ziggler was supposed to run and leap across the ring steps to attack Corbin, and he completely flubbed it and almost fell on his face, but Corbin managed to catch him and then hit his side slam move on the floor, which looked pretty brutal. And the announcers did a pretty good job of covering for it, saying that, yeah, it did look like Ziggler had slipped or something, but Corbin managed to counter whatever he was trying to do anyway. So, again, a decent match at best, but it was what it was. Then, after that, I want to say it was the Sheamus versus Apollo Crews match. Again, nothing spectacular. It was big bully Sheamus showing off his big power moves, and Apollo Crews managing to pull out several really cool athletic looking moves, including he did a ringside to outside moonsault that looked pretty good. Sheamus hits a second rope white noise and then goes to pin him, only gets a 2 count, sits up to argue with the ref, and Crews just kind of cradles him and pins him out of nowhere, and then takes off, and then Sheamus just looks like all sorts of dumbfounded. Again, it was what it was. Not a bad match, just nothing overly memorable. That's the way most of these undercard matches were tonight. Then you also had the women's tag match, Charlotte and Dana Brooke versus Natalya and Becky Lynch. A really good match in my opinion, but considering 3 of the 4 women in there are outstanding wrestlers, and then you have Dana Brooke, but this was just done, I think, to further along some storylines. Becky and Natalya had gotten a good run going. Looked like they were about to win it. Natalya had Charlotte in the sharpshooter. Dana Brooke runs in to grab her. Becky grabs Dana. Dana turns around and throws Becky into Natalya, causing her to bump heads, getting Natalya pinned, and then the heels leave up the ramp just all cackling and everything, and Natalya starts crying in the ring, doing her usual shtick, but then out of nowhere she just turns all sorts of vicious and starts beating the holy crap out of Becky Lynch there. I'm interested to see where this goes. I really think they do need to get Natalya a little bit freshened up, and I think a good heel turn like this and a series of matches against Becky Lynch might do a world of good for her character, considering how stale it has been getting lately. The only thing I can hope for, though, is that Becky Lynch does end up eventually winning that feud, because Becky Lynch has been, ever since she's been brought up, she's been like the forgotten horsewoman that got brought up, and if she doesn't start getting some wins soon, she's going to fall way by the wayside really fast. Then after the women's match, I believe it was the John Cena AJ Styles match. Now this, in my opinion, was the match of the night, and I figured it was probably going to be. I was looking really forward to this match, only because I know John Cena, whenever he gets put in the ring with a really good opponent, he really, really steps his game up, and he can't. And AJ in the ring with him, AJ proved last show how he could make Roman Reigns look really, really good. But in the ring with somebody like John Cena, who's on his A game, it just cranked that up even higher. It was just all sorts of back and forth, back and forth. Everything at the beginning of the match was a whole lot of Cena trying to do stuff and AJ countering every single thing that Cena did, getting him frustrated. Eventually, Cena caught him with a couple of moves, and it shifted the other way, but Cena still could not put him away. Each one of them kicked out of each other's finishers. They broke out of each other's submission moves, so you really couldn't see which way this was going, but it was a really good, hard-fought back-and-forth match. In the end, Cena goes to catch AJ in an attitude adjustment, manages to accidentally knock the ref out, so he hits the AA, pins AJ. Of course, the ref's down. All of a sudden, Gallows and Anderson run down. They attack Cena while AJ's laid out, and then hit the Magic Killer move on Cena, drag AJ over, pin him, and then make their escape. The ref finally gets back in the ring, didn't see what happened, counts the pin on Cena, and then the announcers were all trying to play up that AJ didn't know that Gallows and Anderson had interfered. That was just that Gallows and Anderson robbed AJ of his clean victory, but that gets played out on Raw, and it's still a really good, really good match. I've really enjoyed that match. Then after that, you had the Money in the Bank ladder match. You had Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Chris Jericho, Alberto Del Rio, Dean Ambrose, and Cesaro. Yeah, like I said, I've been drinking a little bit, so I'm a little buzzed here. We'll muddle our way through this one. This was one of the more vicious, brutal Money in the Bank ladder matches that they've had in recent years, and they had pulled a few moves off that I just I don't normally cringe at a lot of these things because I know wrestling's predetermined and all this other stuff, but some of the stuff that they did just looked absolutely brutal. At one point, you had Cesaro get rammed face first into the head of one ladder that was propped into the ring ropes. Just looked like it took his head off. Another really sick moment was you had Kevin Owens and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn still continuing their feud, going back and forth, and Owens looked like he was going to go for a power bomb or something on on Sami Zayn. Sami counters it into a Michinoku driver right on the edge of the ladder. The ladder was kind of standing on its side. It wasn't laid flat, it was standing on its side, and Sami Zayn just plants his back right on the edge of that ladder, and he's just kind of laid out across there. That just looked absolutely brutal, and I don't know how he was able to even move after that. And then a bunch of other just super sick, crazy moves all over the place. It finally comes down. You got Kevin Owens has laid out Sami Zayn with a powerbomb on a ladder. He's managed to climb up the ladder. As he is reaching for it, Dean Ambrose scrambles up the ladder, starts beating on him, and then he reaches through the ladder, grabs him by the shirt, and just rams his face into the ladder like 4 or 5 times, and then drops him over, reaches up, grabs the Money in the Bank, and the place just goes nuts. I never would have guessed that Dean Ambrose was going to win this. in a fantasy land, had I my fantasy booking, yeah, I would have had Dean Ambrose do this, but I just didn't see them pulling the trigger on and putting the Money in the Bank on Dean Ambrose this way. But it did pay off later on in the night. We'll get to that in a minute here. Then after that match, after that insanity, they had Rusev versus Titus O'Neil for Rusev's U.S. title. Now, at this point, the show had already been going a couple of hours. It looked like it was going to be... It definitely went overtime. I think this thing was about 3.5 hours long for the pay-per-view, which is an ungodly amount of time for these things. But so this was about a 5-6 minute match. Again, I would have figured they were playing up that Titus O'Neil's family was out there. He had his sons out there. It's Father's Day. You figure, okay, they're just going to give Titus O'Neil the feel-good Father's Day win. And no, he ends up... they have a good competitive back-and-forth match, but eventually Rusev does lay him out, slaps on the accolade, and makes him tap out in front of his kids. Then, this is what I love about Rusev. Rusev is one of the best true heels they've got out there right now. Between him and Kevin Owens, those are two of the best overall heels they have right now. But Rusev grabs the mic, goes over and talks to Titus O'Neil's kids and says, See that? See your dad in the ring? He's a loser. I beat him. He's a loser. And then goes, Happy Father's Day, and then walks off. So that was what it was. Like I said, I love Rusev right now. I really think this is the best use of him. Hopefully they don't end up killing his momentum anytime soon, because he is one of the best things going. And then finally, the main event, Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. The story in this was Seth Rollins had never actually lost the title. Had to relinquish the title due to injury. So Roman Reigns had never actually beaten him for the title. And he was saying that Roman Reigns could never beat him, and Reigns is like, okay, I need to beat you to solidify that, yes, I am the champion. And that was the story of the match. They were going back and forth and just hitting move after move. It was just, you could tell these guys had knew each other very well, knew how to counter each other, how to work with each other very well. And then the end came. At one point you had Roman Reigns go charging and try to hit a spear on Rollins on the outside. Oh, yeah. Rollins moves out of the way, and Reigns just plows right into the ringside barrier and just looked like he about killed himself. They bring the refs out, they bring doctors out, try to check on him and everything else, and you can't tell what the hell's going on. Eventually, Rollins gets tired of it, grabs Reigns, throws him back in the ring, goes to hit a turnbuckle powerbomb on him, but as I think he went to go and hit turnbuckle. Reigns turns it around and spears him out of nowhere, but the ref got knocked out. So when he hit the spear, the ref was unconscious. He goes for the pin. Ref slowly rolls over. He gets a really, really close 2 3/4 count, and Rollins just kicks out of it. So Reigns goes again, sits in one corner, has Rollins on the other, sets up for the spear, charges across, and Rollins just turns his spear into a quasi-pedigree. It was one of the sweetest looking moves I've ever seen. Just as Reigns is about to hit him, he leaps up and just nails a partial pedigree on him. Gets a 2 count out of that. Rollins is like, okay, screw this. Grabs him again, drags him in the middle of the ring, nails a proper pedigree. 1, 2, 3. Rollins regains his World Heavyweight Championship that he never lost. So he's now a 2-time WWE World Heavyweight Champion. And he's standing there, and all of a sudden, Dean Ambrose music hits. And you're like, what the fuck? No, this can't be happening. No, this won't. They wouldn't do this. So he's sitting there looking up towards the ramp, waiting for Ambrose to come out. And then Ambrose pulls a page out of Rollins' book, sneaks up behind him, and plasters him with the Money in the Bank briefcase. Rolls out the ring, hands the briefcase to the ref, says, I'm cashing in now. So the ref goes, gives it to the ring announcer. They announced them that Ambrose is cashing in, gets back in the ring. Rollins, still stunned from the briefcase shot, staggers up, turns around, dirty deeds by Ambrose, and boom, you now have Dean Ambrose as your World Heavyweight Champion. My man, Dean Ambrose, right here, with his WWE World Heavyweight Championship. I've always been a huge Dean Ambrose fan. I never thought this day would happen. I really didn't. He's one of those wrestlers that just is so unorthodox. He reminds me a lot of a combination of a young Stone Cold and a Brian Pillman with a little bit of Mankind's craziness thrown in. He just has a natural charisma about him and a very unorthodox moveset. I really hope they keep the title on him for a little while, but I seriously doubt it, because they've already announced for the next pay-per-view Battleground that it's going to be a Shield triple threat for the title. So we'll see how that goes. I'm fully expecting that they probably will have whoever ends up winning that match. I really think they're probably going to put it back on Reigns again. They're really padding him up, because this will be his like 4th or 5th title reign in like a year. And I really don't like the way they do things like that, but I think they're going to be setting up for a Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns world title match at SummerSlam. But we'll have to see how that goes, especially since Brock has been announced that he's actually fighting at UFC 200 against Mark Hunt. Now, if he gets knocked out, if he gets injured at this UFC fight, then WWE is screwed. They're gonna be scrambling. So we'll have to see where that all goes from there. But for one night, this is they made history here. The Shield is now the only faction that have all held the WWE World Heavyweight title on the same night. Within 5 minutes, they went. All 3 members of the Shield did hold the WWE World Heavyweight title. No other faction in history can ever claim that. Not the Four Horsemen, not the NWO, not anybody. So this was a very historic night just for that alone. So that's my thoughts on the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Let me get a few plugs out of the way here. First, Glenn Schneider and the Talking About podcast. Make sure you check him out on Facebook and iTunes. A very good, interesting podcast that covers every time he gets somebody on, it's a different topic. He doesn't limit himself to say, I'm just a wrestling podcast, I'm just a video game podcast, I'm just a movie podcast. He tailors the podcast to his guests, so it makes it a very interesting podcast. Also, make sure you check out Joshua Baker's Beer and Song of the Day, Kevin Sherman's Heavy Metal and Booze, Justin Dimmitt's Prosper, and most importantly, check out the On the Network podcast with I just had a really massive brain dump there. Richard Strasberg and Tyler Stigall. Oh God, yeah, you can tell I'm doing pretty good here tonight, folks. So sorry for the flub-ups and kerfluffles there, but that's the end of this show. This is George the Drunken Animal once again signing off, going down for the 1, 2, 3, looking up the lights, doing the JOB. See you next month for Battleground.